Hey everybody, how's it going? Matthew Kadish here, author of the Earthman Jack Space Saga, coming at you today with a very special live stream where we are going to be talking with one of my Twitter friends, the great and powerful Itchy Bacca. Now, for those of you who don't know who Itchy is, he is one of the preeminent Star Wars bloggers for the Fandom Menace, which is a group of Star Wars fans who basically don't like the way the franchise is being handled, and they've been very critical of it. In fact, I consider myself to be a member of this prestigious group. But if one were to point to one of the faces of the Fandom Menace, one might be inclined to point to Itchy himself. So I'm very happy to be joined by Itchy on the live stream today. Itchy, how you doing?
Pretty good. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, busy. Very, very busy.
Yeah.
So we're, let's see here. Someone's saying that there's no sound.
No sound.
No sound.
Out of me or you or both?
I don't know. Can people hear? Let me head over to YouTube real quick and try to troubleshoot this. See if it's a thing. Audio should be working. Oh yeah, it's coming.
I hear you just fine. Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Ferguson, it is just you. So, we're live streaming to both Facebook and YouTube right now. So some people might have different settings going on. So just be sure to check and make sure that the mute button is off. And yeah, we'll get moving on. So Itchy, I met you through Twitter. One of the few good things that came out of Twitter,
right?
and you know, we've gotten to become friends with a close knit group of Twitterverse people, and we talk about Star Wars and Disney and entertainment, movie news, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so, what I wanted to do today was just kind of give people an idea of who you are, what you write about. Mm-hmm. And you know, kind of what our thoughts are on Star Wars, Disney, the Fandom Menace, and stuff mm-hmm. like that. So what I wanted to do was, for those of you out there who aren't familiar with Itchy, he is a blogger, and he runs the blog Disney Star Wars is Dumb. That's the actual name of the blog. I'm not making that up. And we got it over here, so you can see Kathleen Kennedy is forefront on this blog, and you can find it at disneystarwarsisdumb.wordpress.com, or if you just go to Google and type in Disney Star Wars is Dumb, I'm sure it comes up. But he's been at this for quite some time, as you can see from the archives here. He's got a lot of great posts, and one of the things I love about Itchy is that like he does a lot of deep dives into various topics, all focused around Star Wars. It seems like you're posting an article like 3-4 times a day almost sometimes.
Some of those articles are pretty short. You know, there's really not much to comment on. You know, it might just be a video that was published or something, and others are a lot more lengthy. So it varies. It depends on the news of the day, the subject matter, whatnot.
Yeah. So a lot of what you do is you kind of highlight stuff that's going on in the Star Wars fandom. It's like if somebody is misbehaving, or if somebody is doing something that's kind of interesting or offbeat or whatever, you'll do a post about it, you'll put it out there on Twitter, and people will go crazy over it. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to start off by kind of diving into the history of your blog a little bit.
Yeah.
So you started your blog in January of 2018, which is about a month after The Last Jedi was released.
Yeah.
That's no coincidence, I'm sure.
No, it is not.
Yeah. So what I want to ask you is, what is your blog about, and what inspired you to not only start it, but continue it for as long as you have been?
Well, you know, as far as continuing it, I had never intended for it to go on this long. You know, I initially thought I'd write a few, maybe a dozen or so posts just expressing my opinion, and I'd be done with it. But the dumb things just kept coming day after day after day and continue to come. So there was always something to comment on. As far as how I started it, you know, it really kind of started with the particular phase of the Geekergate with suppression of dissenting voices. Initially, I had been commenting at the bulletin boards on imdb.com before they got rid of them altogether, and a few other sites. And it became clear that wherever progressives were moderating, they simply would not allow opinions that they disagreed with. And they would do it under the aegis of, well, it's bad behavior. Well, you're not being civil. Well, you're sexist. Well, that's misogynist. That's racist, etc. So I just decided to start my own blog where I could write my own opinion, where I couldn't be touched. And that was that.
Well, what were some of the things that you were writing about that were getting you accused of misogyny and sexism and stuff like that?
Well, primarily at imdb.com, I posted my review of The Force Awakens, which is also on my blog. At the top of the blog, you can read that. That had been posted at imdb.com. And that was labeled sexist and misogynist because I was criticizing the nature of the female protagonist. And I would criticize her in a way that really had nothing to do with her genitalia. It's, it's kind of a throwback to the old exploitation films where you see this tiny little girl putting big guys in headlocks and everybody rolls their eyes and laughs. And that was my take on it. It wasn't something like Alien or Terminator, any of these films where have very well written female characters, which had been done 30, 40 years ago. So this was kind of a reversion. That was primarily what got me the label of sexist and misogynist. That, along with citing the Mary Sue trope, which everybody is labeled sexist for using that. So,
in fact, I did an article all about how Mary Sues aren't sexist. In fact, the people who write the Mary Sue, create the Mary Sue, are more sexist than the people who criticize the Mary Sue.
Well, right. That's been my experience too. There's a lot of misandry going on masquerading as feminism. And
so basically what you were saying is you were expressing your objectively neutral opinion online about actual story elements.
Right.
And through censorship on these different platforms, you got frustrated and you went off and you created your own blog.
Right.
Just so you couldn't be censored.
Right. Even on my own blog, I've written a blog post about how the female protagonist could have been handled better. So it's certainly not something I'm against. But SJWs will use that as any criticism as an opportunity to label you as a villain so they can feel like a hero. And round and round it goes.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, there's a lot of kind of loaded terminology associated with the term SJW. People take offense to it. People have a lot of different kind of connotations associated with it. And I think that for the sake of our conversation today, we should just kind of agree that SJWs, as we refer to them, it's not a negative thing. It's a description of a certain type of behavior, especially online. And these are people who tend to be very kind of easily offended and easily outraged, and they like to celebrate that outrage in a lot of ways. And they also tend to attack people who have differing views as opposed to engaging with them and having civil debate. They actually, they will dox people. They will go out of their way to try and ruin their lives or their livelihood or something like that. And so for our purposes, when we say SJW, that's kind of what we're referring to. And we're not trying to attack a specific kind of group of people because we're the good guys here. We're not in favor of censorship. We're not in favor of hating for the sake of hate. We're in favor of honest, open debate and criticism.
Right.
And stuff.
Well, SJWs are multicultural and multiracial, so we wouldn't be singling out any single group.
Yeah. We got a few people here. Dr. Taco, good to see you.
Yeah.
We got, let's see here, Mr. Laser Pants Toy Junk. Hail.
Hey, guys.
And we've also got Jer Ferguson on Facebook. So we've got some good people here.
Yeah.
Got Yeah, I'm going to be selling these soon. So like in time for Christmas, you guys can pick up some Earthman Jack hats. But getting back to Itchy's blog, one of the things that always kind of strikes me about your articles and stuff like that is that they're always very focused. You have a specific kind of target that you stay on with your blog. And you've obviously been very critical of Disney and their handling of the Star Wars franchise.
Oh, yeah.
So what I want to know is, what do you think is the biggest mistake Disney has made in regards to Star Wars? And why do you think these mistakes were made in the first place?
Well, I'll tell you, when it was first announced that Disney was purchasing Star Wars, I was pretty optimistic because I recognized some of the issues with the prequels. I know you're not a fan of them. For me, they're kind of a mixed bag. I think there's good things in them, particularly the art design. But regardless, I thought, well, maybe that's what they need. They'll take George Lucas's treatments or outlines and do with those what they've done in Marvel. And that wasn't the case. So I really think that is the biggest mistake, is failing to use George Lucas's outlines, treatments, and having a screenwriter flesh those out.
Any other mistakes you think Disney's made in their handling of this, IP?
Well, my blog is full of them. Daily, it seems like. One of the biggest ones, I know Rebel Force Radio has cited a failure to either enact or enforce a social media policy. This whole thing really started, quite frankly, I think the backlash is more of a result of the comments from Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams about being threatened by women, more so than it is the movie itself, because bad movies are made all the time. It's not a big deal. But when you're calling people names because they criticize your movie, that's something else entirely.
Yeah, it really does come down to filmmakers directly attacking the fans for being critical.
Yeah.
In some cases, justifiably critical of their art. But one of the things that you touched on just there that I want to talk about a little bit is that Lucasfilm employees have been very vocal in their attacks on people who are critical of the Star Wars movies. And, you said that you think one of the big mistakes is not kind of clamping down on that personal social media behavior. Mm-hmm. What are some examples of that you would consider like bad behavior from the Lucasfilm employees directed towards the fandom?
Well, the primary one came from J.J. Abrams, him talking to IndieWire, telling them that, if we have a problem with a movie that has women, then our problem isn't Star Wars. We're just threatened by women or something along those lines. That was just unbelievably stupid. And that was really the primary thing. And you got Rian Johnson running around calling people man babies and things of that nature. I think he's really just kind of a attention hound. Every time things seem to start to quiet down, he seems to kind of pop his head up again and cause a ruckus. And you had Chuck Wendig going off like a crazy man.
Is one of the authors of some of the Star Wars novels, right?
Yeah, the Aftermath trilogy, and he was working for Marvel, working on some of their Star Wars comic books, and that guy was telling Republicans to throw themselves into wood chippers, just crazy stuff, and the list really just goes on and on, particularly with the writers. Right now, I've got a new subheading up at the menu on my blog about Lucasfilm reps who hate white males. And all you got to do is pick one and go through their tweets, and tweet after tweet after tweet, they're bitching about white males over and over and over and over again.
So here's the post that says Lucasfilm's hatred of white males. Is this
right?
what you're talking about?
Right. So I've been looking at them, and looking at like there's Claudia Gray, Delilah Dawson, Geek Girl Diva, who works on the website. There's a number of them in there. Authors. Let's see here.
So when it comes to this type of behavior from Lucasfilm employees, obviously this is the type of stuff that, on one side, you could look at it as these people are insulting a certain group of the fandom, particularly like people like me. Like, I'm a white guy. I see something like this, and that tells me that the people in charge of Star Wars don't seem to want me to like Star Wars anymore. They want to take it away from me. On the other side of that, there's from these people's point of view, someone like me has had their time in the sun with this stuff. And they look at my criticism of something like The Last Jedi as an attack against it. And so they want to take it away from me and safeguard it. So there's this kind of weird, two sides of the same coin type thing.
Well, it's really, there's a certain level of it that can be interpreted as self-deprecating, but this stuff really goes beyond that, because these guys are posting, sometimes 50 posts, 50 tweets talking about white males over and over and over again.
Yeah, and they're being very general about it, right? It's like every white male is a bad guy.
Yeah. And some tweets are worse than others, in their severity. But, bigotry is not acceptable towards anyone, no matter who they are, white men included. It's never acceptable on any level. So, this isn't either.
And it seems like most of these people who are making these claims aren't actually fans of the material. They're people who have co-opted it for their political messaging, and then they attack those who disagree with their political messages.
Well, astonishingly enough, while reading many of the tweets from the authors, it became evident that many of them weren't really aware of the material either, surprisingly. They were aware of kind of the surface trappings, the visuals of it, and the names and stuff like that, but they weren't really aware of the deeper layers. For instance, I think it was might have been Claudia Gray, one of the authors, one of the female authors, essentially felt that the Force was about kindness, like karma or Christmas spirit. It's just this kind of cluelessness. But even worse than that was early on, when I was reading all of these articles from all of these feminist commentators from the marysue.com and other places. And it was pretty ultra crystal clear that they probably haven't even watched the movie.
Indeed, like a lot of these people seem to be kind of new fans. Like someone like me, I've been a fan of Star Wars since the early 80s. I was born in 79, so or 78, I should say. And so I kind of grew up on this stuff. Whereas a lot of these people who work at Lucasfilm, it's like they just started watching Star Wars in 2015. And they caught up with all the back movies, and they're just kind of, they don't have the history to it. And so a lot of their defense of the way Disney's taking things is kind of skewed more towards the new material as opposed to respecting what came before it.
There's a lot of Johnny-come-latelys. And that has manifested itself in the way Lucasfilm has conducted business. I've got a blog post about Ben Burt, about him talking about how the new guard wasn't calling him. They basically told him, just sit in your studio and we'll call you if we need you, which is pretty astonishing. So, that's just par for the course, I guess. But it's frustrating because you've got a lot of folks who've been watching it for, 4 years, lecturing people who have had experience watching it and reading the material for 40 years. It's kind of silly,
Mm-hmm. All right. So getting back to the focus on Disney here. You've often made it clear that you think the Star Wars brand is dead, or at the very least in heavy decline.
Oh, yeah.
Why do you think this is, and what do you say to people who disagree with your assessment?
Well, I think there's a number of canaries in the coal mine. I wrote a blog post where I predict. I know you're going to scoff at it. I predict that Episode 9 will do less than Solo at the box office, and I list a number of reasons. And these reasons are really the same reason why I feel it's dead. First and foremost is the Last Jedi's box office. It did gangbusters on the first weekend, but immediately the second weekend there's a huge drop off. So right away that indicated that people weren't coming back for repeat viewings like they had in previous movies. The box office ranking dropped to 71st place. There was the public misbehavior of Lucasfilm representatives that are pushing people away. The Solo box office failure. That day, we were watching all the people tweet pictures of empty theaters. And then so you got to ask yourself, how many people went to Solo? And out of those people, how many people were satisfied enough to come for another Star Wars movie? There was a couple of instances where, The Last Jedi had glowing reviews from the critics, and then it turned out to be crap. And then Solo got glowing reviews from the critics, and then that turned out to be not so good. And so there's a little bit of that going on, where critics are kind of hoodwinking people about the quality of these films. You've got the falling toy and merchandise sales. You got the falling Blu-ray and DVD sales. You got Star Wars Resistance, which is canceled after only one season. You got falling comic book sales. Galaxy's Edge is a ghost town. And the trailers they've released for Episode 9 are boring. And then you can go on to Google and you can see all these graphs about interest levels between previous installments and, the upcoming Rise of Skywalker. And it's a visual cue. The interest level is not anywhere near what it was for The Force Awakens or even The Last Jedi before that was released. So all the signs are there.
I mean, I would agree that there are some telltale signs, but I also think that everything you listed has some type of rebuttal to it that could explain why it's happening, and that it's not necessarily affecting Star Wars the way people think it is. Stuff like DVD sales, for instance. More and more people are going towards streaming, so DVD sales just on a whole are on the decline. There's always a counterpoint, at least from the studio's perspective, to dismiss these kind of signs that you pointed out that Star Wars is in decline.
I think, those are legitimate arguments for each individual point. But when you start seeing the same trend on all these different points together, if it were just Galaxy's Edge that were a ghost town, or if it were just Blu-ray sales that were going down, those counterpoints might have more weight. But because we're seeing this all across the board in every media of fans just walking away, including the actual movie Solo, with the empty theaters, I think it makes a pretty powerful case. So I'm not really too convinced by the counter arguments.
I do think that Solo's failure was kind of, very representative of how Disney has mishandled the franchise. Not only in terms of giving us a movie that the fans didn't really particularly want, but also their mismanagement of the production, where they had to fire the directors after the movie was 80% shot and then had to go back and redo the whole thing. But beyond that, the release strategy, getting it out of that coveted December release window and pushing it up to the summer.
Yeah.
And kind of just getting it lost in the shuffle there, especially so close to The Last Jedi. And there was still like heavy backlash.
Yeah.
That movie. And people were just kind of like, screw Solo. I don't want to see it.
Well, here's the thing. You know, guys like us who are, you know, cinemaphiles, and I do some of that, you know, myself. You know, I do video editing work and motion graphics and that sort of thing. Guys like us are going to pay close attention to that sort of thing. You know, all the drama going on behind the scenes, you know, because we love watching making of documentaries. And, you know, we're interested in the industry and the business of filmmaking. But the general audience doesn't really care about any of that. You know, the general audience wouldn't know that they had fired a director and hired a new one. So I really feel pretty strongly that drop in the second weekend from The Last Jedi portended what was to come with Solo. That kind of told you what was to come with Solo, because that was the general audience saying, you know, this is boring.
Yeah, it is kind of funny because, you know, The Force Awakens, upon, you know, reflection on that movie, it's not a good movie. But at the time, you know, people enjoyed it. They liked it. And so when The Last Jedi came out, I know me personally, I was very excited to see it. And walking out of that theater on opening night, it felt like I'd been stabbed by a knife and all the air had just kind of escaped from my balloon-shaped body. And I feel like The Last Jedi is really the movie that has killed the fandom for the most part.
Yeah.
In terms of just like it fractured the fan base, and it created such a, like, it basically assassinated the character of Luke Skywalker, which for many people is Star Wars. It's
right.
He's the linchpin that holds the franchise together.
Yeah.
And so it created not only just like fan backlash, but the fact that Lucasfilm employees and Rian Johnson have been very vocal in attacking the people who didn't like what they did.
Yeah.
Has even further cemented that divide. So where do you think the fan base stands, and what part do you think The Last Jedi had to play in the downfall of Star Wars, in your opinion?
Well, from my opinion, the whole thing, the whole sequel trilogy was really a house of cards from the beginning. It really started with The Force Awakens. And even before then, it started with the firebombing of the EU, which is a significant fan base.
So you mean when Disney came out and canceled the expanded books?
Yeah. You know, that pissed off quite a people, and that kind of started to set the stage for it. The Force Awakens was mildly entertaining, but it was also kind of boring. It was just empty fluff, but it wasn't offensive in the way that The Last Jedi was just outright offensive. It was like getting spit in the eye, for multiple different reasons. But you know, but it all began really right in the beginning. It started right in the beginning. When they got a hold of it, they decided not to use Lucas's treatments. That screwed them point blank from the beginning. And then, you know, all of the comments coming from, you know, Kathleen Kennedy, I don't feel I have to cater to men just because they've been fans for a very long time. You know, a lot of guys said, oh, fine, I've been sinking money into your franchise for 40 years. I'll take it elsewhere. And I think that's why you saw the empty theaters in Solo, partially.
It is kind of interesting looking at Disney's strategy with the Star Wars franchise. And I think a lot of this kind of is attributed to Kennedy, where basically they came in and they're like, okay, we know that we have the young white male, old white male audience shored up. We want to expand the appeal of this franchise. So we want to go after people of color. We want to go after women, stuff like that. And so like they started making decisions on the content that they're going to create and you know, who they're going to try to target. And particularly it was women. And so they're like, we want to bring more women into the Star Wars fan base. But the strategy was weird because they did so at the expense of the already established male fan base.
Right.
And just naturally, men tend to gravitate towards like science fiction and fantasy genre.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And so like women, by and large,
and war-based things,
Yeah. Like stuff like relationship-based stuff and comedies and things of that nature. And of course that's generalizing a little bit, but there's also some science to back up that, men and women have different viewing habits and stuff like that. So basically, sure. Disney's strategy of trying to expand the fan base of Star Wars by focusing on people who aren't naturally inclined to be fans at the expense of people who are. It's kind of an odd choice to me.
That's exactly right. And, previously there had been women who were interested in the franchise, but that's because those particular women like the science fiction and the war stories that, typically attract men. There's a certain portion of women who like that particular material. So when you change it, you're going to alienate those women too.
Yeah, and I don't think it's sexist to say something like that. I mean, for instance, my girlfriend, she's barely ever even seen a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
When we first started dating, I was like, "What? You've never seen Star Wars?" She's like, "No, I'm not into that type of thing." She doesn't like Star Trek either, but she loves Harry Potter, and I'm not all that into Harry Potter. Like I enjoy Harry Potter, but I'm not at the level that she's to Harry Potter what I am to Star Wars in terms of fandom.
Yeah.
And so just to say that, like, in general, women don't tend to gravitate towards science fiction and fantasy, that's not to be misogynist or sexist. That's just stating, a general fact.
Yeah, it's just the way it is. This is something, though, that has been tried many times and it always fails. There is a series on Netflix called, The Toys That Made Us. Mm-hmm. And there's an episode about He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And they tried to do that there. They created She-Ra, and She-Ra has the power too. But then what happened was all the boys who've been playing with He-Man saw that their sister also had the power. So now it wasn't very cool anymore. And the toy line kind of went defunct shortly after that. One of the, you could tell this woman, this middle-aged woman, is probably a feminist, and she says, "Oh, that's ridiculous," because she thinks 10-year-old boys should think like middle-aged feminists, of course, right? And they don't. They never will. And it's just the way it is. So that's exactly what happened here with Star Wars. They tried to do this again, and again it failed, and it will continue to fail every time they try it.
Yeah, that is a really good documentary on Netflix, though. If anyone out there hasn't watched it yet, I highly recommend checking it out.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about your blog a little bit more. Your blog's been going for about 2 years now. As your blog's matured over the years, one could say that you're now kind of skirting the edge of being more of an investigative journalist within the Star Wars fandom than just a mere blogger or commentator. And I think that's why you have such a following online. So what I wanted to ask you is, what is your process for choosing the stories to write about, and what kind of research do you do before you write them?
Okay. Really what interests me is just the stupid things coming out about Star Wars. So the first thing I look at will be articles written about Star Wars, and I'll comment on those. That's kind of the first tier of things that I would comment on. After that, I start looking around at comments from Lucasfilm representatives, because they're really my primary interest. I'm not so much interested in the fans or the shills too much. Except for now, when it involves a Lucasfilm rep.
Who would you consider to be Lucasfilm reps, and who would you consider to be like shills? And
well, anybody who earns money from working for Lucasfilm, either writing for them or filming for them or whatever it is. Whereas a shill might be somebody who only gets, premier tickets to Solo or something like that.
A writer for a website that positive press for Disney in exchange for access.
Yeah, a professional fan, basically. I'm not so much interested in them too much.
Yeah, so you're more interested in the people who are within the inner workings of Lucasfilm.
Right. So occasionally there's overlap. Occasionally, shills will overlap with Lucasfilm reps, particularly in the case of like Brian Young, where he's interacting with Jason Ward all the time and Steele. So in some cases, there's some overlap. And for a while, people were genuinely thinking that Mr. Ward perhaps had a stronger connection to Lucasfilm than he was letting on, or a number of indicators for that. Whether or not that's true, I have no idea at this point in time. But so that's basically kind of my tier of priorities, I guess you'd call it.
And what type of research do you do before you write an article?
Well, when it comes to articles, I'm basically just commenting on them. If there's something that is historical based, I'll go to my library and pull out a book, or I'll Google something online. I'm an older gentleman, so sometimes I don't remember everything. I got to refresh my memory about stuff. And I'll look for, I like to cite a lot of history a lot of times to support my arguments. And so I'll look that kind of stuff up to make sure I'm right on it. In terms of, commenting or investigating Lucasfilm reps and what they're doing, it's really just a matter of sifting through Twitter. And occasionally I'll get tips from tipsters, some of whom I cite at the bottom of my blog posts, some of whom remain anonymous. Some of the tweets I find myself. It's just about curiosity. And so that's about it.
Yeah, I think one of the more interesting blog posts that you did recently was you actually got in contact with the baby mama of Mark Hamill's son, and she was a former adult actress. She basically got pregnant and told the Hamills that she had an abortion, but she went off and had the baby. Mm-hmm. And you I don't know how exactly you got in touch with her, but she kind of spilled the beans to you about all this stuff, and you wrote a very kind of incendiary blog post exposing all this stuff, and it came at a time when Hamill had just kind of tweeted attacking Trump's I shouldn't say attacking, but he made a tweet that kind of reflected poorly on Ivanka Trump and her son.
Right.
And,
the fact it was, but it was honestly just synchronicity. It just happened to happen at the right time. I myself wasn't too concerned about the Trump tweet too much. I think it's fair game to criticize any politician. I know that there was a kid in there. I don't think Hamill was deliberately targeting the kid. I think.
Let me just set the stage here. So for people who might not know what we're talking about, Ivanka Trump put out a tweet with a picture of her husband, Jared Kushner, and their small child. And the small child was dressed up as a First Order stormtrooper. And her tweet said something like, "The force is strong with our family." And then Mark Hamill retweeted that and said, "Go force yourself." Yeah. And it was obviously Mark Hamill, he's very outspoken as he's against the Trumps. He's against the Trump family. He's very much a liberal Democrat. And a lot of people kind of looked at this innocuous tweet from Ivanka Trump kind of celebrating her child's choice for a Halloween costume. And they looked at it as Mark Hamill kind of punching down, doing like a little bit of a low blow. Like if it had just been Ivanka and Jared, it probably wouldn't have been a big deal. But because there was a kid involved, some people got a little bit insulted about that.
Yeah, I don't think Hamill deliberately targeted the kid. I think the kid got caught in the crossfire. When you're on a train like that, constantly hating someone, sometimes it becomes a reaction, a knee-jerk kind of a thing. And I think he just let his passions get the best of him there, and said something stupid. But I don't think he was deliberately targeting the kid. This other story, however, was something else entirely.
I mean, this is the type of thing that, for our fan community, this would be on the cover of the New York Times. This would be the front page. Yeah. But because it was you, a lot of people kind of just, haters going to hate. They kind of dismissed it as that. But
Sure.
Why don't you tell everyone, first of all, what was the general gist of the story, and can you tell people how it kind of came to your attention and
Sure.
developed?
So I had an individual who will remain nameless, who sent me the Yahoo story that from Yahoo Lifestyle, that the woman Megan had written herself. She had told her story,
and this is the woman that Hamill's son had an affair with.
Yeah, and basically conceived a child with. So then I found some other sites saying some other stuff. And so I went and I posted it. And then Megan had been posting publicly in that particular Twitter thread. She must have either saw it herself or been notified of it, and started posting some additional comments in that thread. And then I had found out some additional things going on with regards to the Hamills, in particular their history. And it was disconcerting to me because this couple was bullying this woman into getting an abortion. And, some people may feel that it's, he said, she said kind of a thing. But in this particular instance, I do believe the woman.
So Mark Hamill and his wife were kind of pressuring this girl to get an abortion.
Right. I do believe the woman in this particular instance. I know you had mentioned that she was an adult star. Apparently she had done something like 7 films. So she wasn't, out there doing 200 of these movies.
Well, I mean, but she kind of said that she met Mark Hamill's son through, like, I think Tinder or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like a sordid type of, like, you met her at a strip club type thing.
Right.
It was like a normal hookup.
I mean, it's not, wouldn't be my first choice where to meet someone, but look, people meet people on Tinder and all kinds of adult dating sites all the time. That's not too unusual to me.
Read her responses on this, and it sounded like she was legitimately looking for someone to date. It wasn't like she was on the hunt for a sugar daddy, or she was trying to lock the guy in, by getting pregnant or anything like that. She was very kind of just matter of fact. Hey, this is what happened. This is how it happened.
Well, and they try to label her as a gold digger, but she accepted, an offer of $325 a month and no health insurance, which isn't exactly digging for gold. So, and she passed those. I found emails online, and so I was able to post those as well.
Now, did she reach out to you personally? Like, was there DMs involved, or was this all public exchanged?
I have been in contact with her, but only briefly.
Yeah, and I think that this story in particular, it's interesting to me because it's kind of indicative of your form of fan journalism when it comes to Star Wars, where this is a story that no news website that kind of promotes Disney content would touch with a 10-foot pole.
Right.
And yet this is the type of stuff that you report on, which is the often overlooked bad behavior of people associated with Star Wars in an official manner.
Yeah. So, it's something that really, it really kind of made me angry, and it still makes me angry that somebody would, pressure someone else to get an abortion like that, when it should just be that individual's.
And this girl,
this
girl didn't get an abortion. She said that she did to get them to back off, but then she went ahead and had the kid, and she actually has pictures of it online. It's a beautiful little girl.
Yeah, that's basically when she DM'd me, she basically just pointed me to the comments she was making in the public space online. So that's pretty much all she did there. But pretty much everything she had to say was all in the public sphere in that thread.
and it's never been covered by any actual news outlet as far as I've seen.
Yeah.
So that's an example of the kind of news stories that your blog is known for. So what I want to ask you is, so far this year in 2019, what do you think is the biggest story you've covered concerning Star Wars and Disney, and why?
Oh, I think it's the whole Kelly Marie Tran Instagram incident.
All right. Can you give us some background on what that is and what happened?
So, Kelly Marie Tran basically had an Instagram account.
She's the actress who played Rose Tico.
Yes.
In The Last Jedi.
And she went right about the time when she was scheduled to go filming for episode 9. She put up this message on her Instagram that said, "I'm afraid, but doing it anyway," or something very close to that. So she never deleted her Instagram account. She essentially, what's the word I'm looking for? She
made it private.
She made it private, or she closed it down. Basically, what that does is it makes all the content invisible. You can't see it except for this one little message. And out of that, one unverified Twitter account tweeted out that she left social media because all the racist, toxic fans were harassing her and stuff. So I started looking into it. And I started reading all these articles that were reporting on it. And they were very sparse on actual facts. Most of it was just speculation. Most of it all went back to the single tweet. Where it all originated, was that single tweet. And then later on, she wrote a couple. Tweet, right? What's that?
The unverified tweet?
Yeah, the unverified tweet. Later on, she wrote a couple of articles, and she never specifically said anything about her Instagram account, either in the article or in the one interview she had. She was saying a lot of generalities, and nothing specific. So it really strongly felt like she wasn't being entirely honest, I hate to say, but I kind of wonder if, when that whole ball started rolling, she probably got a lot of feedback and adoration from her peers. "Oh, you poor person of color, you're so strong, you're so brave," all this stuff. And she may have even got a couple of job offers out of it. Who knows? So if she had only closed down her Instagram account because she was wanting to better comply with an NDA, which is what many of us suspect, if she was only doing that, then I lost my train of thought. But at any rate, so a lot of us thought that she was closing down her account due to better comply with an NDA, so she wouldn't release any spoilers online, because they're pretty strict with that stuff. The message that she left on her Instagram, afraid but doing it anyway, to me, it doesn't even relate to anything even remotely racist or sexist or misogynist. To me, it sounds like an actress talking about butterflies, the natural butterflies you get when you go on performance.
And yet there's this persistent narrative carried on by a lot of these news sites that, she was bullied and it was because of racism and sexism.
Right.
That's why she's not on social media anymore and stuff like that.
One of the more interesting aspects of it, and it is quite an involved and convoluted story, actually. There's I've got the KMT Instagram incident up at the top of my blog. You can read through the collection of blog posts about it. But later on, we discovered that there was a purported racist edit on Wikipedia, and Newsweek published the IP address that made that edit. And I found out by plugging in the IP address into various search locators that it was about 20 minutes away from Jason Ward's making StarWars.net studio. That edit could have been made by anyone, anywhere in the world, but it was 20 minutes away from Jason Ward. And the reason why that's suspicious is because he's been caught many times feeding false leaks to rival websites to discredit them. There was a whole thread at MillenniumFalcon.com that Data Racer found and passed on to me. That's all in those blog posts where people are essentially screen capturing him talking in a private forum and posting it online, and it'd show him saying stuff that he hates Star Wars fans with a passion, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then we'll be Chancellor.
Exactly is Jason Ward, and what is his involvement in Star Wars?
Jason Ward is what you might call a shill. He runs makingstarwars.net. He's incredibly accurate with a lot of his leaks, which is one of the reasons people think he's more connected to Lucasfilm. Another reason is that Kathy Kennedy's official Twitter account followed Jason Ward and didn't follow very many other people. I think she follows about a dozen people, maybe at the most. It's been a while since I looked at it, but that was that, and it's just a big mess. It was inside the wheelhouse of the things Jason was known to do. So it was no surprise that the IP address would be 20 minutes away from his studio.
Like he could have done it on his phone on the way to the studio or something like
that.
Right.
That he was stopping at Dunkin' Donuts and doing it in their lobby on their Wi-Fi. All
right. So the biggest story of 2019, in your opinion, was this fake Marie Tran got bullied off of Instagram.
Yeah.
Story.
And being able to find of the lack of evidence, being able to find where the story pointed to, the origin of the story, which itself was fishy. It was essentially, even if it was a genuine post, it was pure speculation. The fact that she never came outright and said point blank, I left Instagram because of racist and sexist fans. Those words never came out of her mouth or never through her fingers, in text. There's just so many weird things around that story. And Jason Ward only being 20 minutes away from that Wikipedia edit IP. Just so many odd things that it's pretty clear that it was all manufactured outrage. They were looking for something to pin on the toxic fan base, and along came that.
Yeah, to advance this narrative that anyone critical of Star Wars is racist or sexist, or
right.
All right, so let's talk about some of the big wigs behind the current state of Star Wars. What are your thoughts on Disney CEO Bob Iger, Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy, and writer-director Rian Johnson, director and writer of The Last Jedi?
Rian Johnson, I think he's a very mediocre filmmaker. Watching The Last Jedi, even beyond the offensive stuff in there was just a lot of shoddy filmmaking, a lot of shoddy edits, just weird things that just didn't make sense. As a filmmaker, I don't have too much respect for him. And even as a person, he's just he's a liar, and he
has a very big ego.
He has a big ego, and it's unwarranted. But he pushes the right politics, so it opens doors for him. And that's essentially all there is to him. Kathleen Kennedy, she's one of these diehard feminists, and that's a big part of what killed the franchise. Feminism and war stories don't necessarily mix.
She also seems
like peanut butter.
A very lackluster creative producer. Like she's had all the movies under her watches have had quite a few problems, with The Last Jedi outstanding, because one of the reasons why she loved working with Rian Johnson is because he came in on time and on budget, and every other director she worked with was apparently going off the rails.
Yeah, well, that's something a producer likes to see, right? On time and on budget. So, yeah, she's she's a liar too. I've got 3 trailers up at my Indiegogo, and the third trailer I put up there has clips of her saying all kinds of stuff about how they were, what would George do? It's like a what would George do every day on the set, and this is, Iger just put out that they threw out his treatments. So it's a bunch of horse shit.
And what do you think about Bob Iger and how he's handled the franchise?
Well, Bob Iger I think he should have chosen. I guess he didn't really have a choice because Lucas kind of handpicked Kennedy. He should have surrounded himself with better people who understood the franchise better. I can't blame Iger too much, I don't think. I'm sure he wasn't a big Star Wars fan, so he wouldn't know all of the ins and outs of the property, like somebody like, say, Filoni or somebody else might. And even Kennedy doesn't, she doesn't know anything about the franchise.
No, just surface level stuff. I think that much is obvious. Like, she knows the characters' names.
Yeah. The big 3.
All right.
And Darth Vader.
So we kind of talked about the people behind Star Wars, but let's talk about the fandom, because obviously, we have to talk about the Star Wars fandom, because there are those people out there who are big fans of yours, but there are also people out there who are big detractors of yours. They don't like what you write and what you do.
Oh, sure.
So what do you think of the Star Wars fandom in general, and why do you think some people can be so vitriolic in their defense of it?
That's a good question. With regards to the defense of the sequel trilogy and the Disney era, it really comes down to politics. It's the social justice politics. Those are the guys who are going to defend it no matter what. You could have a 3-hour film of a turd, but if you put in some Che Guevara propaganda, they'll love it. So it doesn't matter what's on screen. The film craft doesn't matter. It's all about the politics. And so when you criticize a movie that contains those politics, they're going to come after you. And that's really what it's all about.
Well, how much of that do you think is political, and how much of it is just blind brand loyalty? Like, there's such hardcore fans of the franchise that they look at any criticism as a personal attack.
I don't see too much of the latter, to be perfectly honest with you. There's some out there, don't get me wrong, but I don't see too much of that. Most of the mindless defenses I see all revolve around politics. It just does.
So you think a lot of the detractors of what you do, it's because you're the one who points out the political attacks.
Yeah.
And they see that as something that they have to respond to.
Absolutely, because they're all activists, right?
That's a good thing. In fact, we have a good example of that you posted about today with Freddie Prinze Jr.
Yeah.
Now, I guess he did some voice work on Rebels. Is that correct?
Yeah, he did. He voiced, I think, the primary lead character in that show.
And so give us some background on some of the bad behavior that Freddie Prinze Jr. has directed towards the fandom.
Well, he was talking, how it really sparked with him in the early days. He was talking to Pablo Hidalgo on Twitter and said, "I'm sorry you have to deal with these guys."
Who is Pablo Hidalgo exactly?
Pablo Hidalgo. He's one of the Lucasfilm Story Group members and quite a salty dude.
So he's an official Lucasfilm employee.
Yeah, he's an official. I don't know that employee is the right term, executive or representative, however you want to term it. I don't know how his contract is framed, but the Freddie Prinze Jr. was talking to him, and he said, "I just read a tweet to Pablo Hidalgo complaining about young Solo not looking or sounding like Harrison Ford. You need to raise Pablo." That was kind of the sparking moments back in April of 2018. And then from there, people responded to him, and then he responded back, and he's kind of a short fuse. So, if people respond back, he just goes on and on and on like the Energizer Bunny. And he launched a whole series of insults, towards fans, critical fans, etc. And then he just recently did that again up on a interview that it was posted on Instagram by All Things Comedy.
So that was just one of the many examples of an official Lucasfilm representative attacking the fan base.
Yeah, it's like, particularly with Pablo. Pablo was like a disgruntled employee. He's kind of one of those folks. But this has come from multiple representatives. And it's hard to remember them all even anymore because it's been going on for 2 years. It's probably been going on longer than that. And we just never really paid attention to it before.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about the Star Wars fan base, and the segment of the fan base that is kind of critical and not happy with the direction Star Wars is going. They have a term for these people, and it's called the fandom menace.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to ask you was, how would you define what the fandom menace is? What's your experience with those who consider themselves to be part of the fandom menace? And what would you say to people who look at the fandom menace as a hate group?
Well, I wouldn't have too much to say to people who look at it as a hate group, mainly because they're not educated about it. I quite frankly don't care what SJWs think. I have no respect for them. So, whatever. As far as what the fandom is, for me, from my perspective, it represents the ability to either like or dislike any form of media and to be able to support it or criticize it without being insulted or attacked for doing either one. So that's really what it means to me. And to be free of the constant propagandized politics that they really want to push.
So to you, the fandom menace is kind of like the freedom group. They're the ones who aren't going to be censored. They're the ones who's going to speak their minds. They're the ones who are going to stand up for what they believe is, the fans, right?
Yeah. And, that's typically how I default politically anyways. Sounds
very libertarian.
I definitely lean libertarian, but I'm really kind of a policy by policy guy, and I will side with whatever policy solution facilitates the most personal freedom, whatever that happens to be.
Yeah, individual liberty and freedom, I think, is something that most people should agree on in terms of, supporting. And you got to balance the good with the bad on that. I mean, sometimes I think Drunk 3PO said it best, where, if you have a couple of corrupt cops, does that mean that every cop is bad?
Yeah.
There are some people in the fandom menace that I wouldn't kind of point to as pristine examples of fans, but at the same time, there are lots of people in it that are very smart, very talented, very educated, and have legitimate gripes about what's happening to one of their beloved franchises.
Yeah, well, it takes all kinds. So, nothing is perfect. We live in an imperfect world. We live in a sphere of entropy. It's just the way it is. There is no utopia. It doesn't exist.
So do you think Star Wars is beyond redemption at this point, or is there a way Disney can adjust course and fix the mistakes that they made with the franchise?
No, I think it's pretty much done for. I mean, if they had the opportunity to put out a really great movie after The Last Jedi, things might have been able to swing around, but they ended up with lackluster Solo, and now they're hell-bent on completing the sequel trilogy, and it's going to be awful because the same people are making it. The current crop of creators at Lucasfilm don't have the talent or the capability necessary to pull off something like the original trilogy. Or even the prequel trilogy. It's just not there. The talent isn't there because they're focused on hiring based on genitalia and melanin, so they're not hiring based on talent. So there's really no hope. This episode 9 is going to be a flaming dumpster. And that's it. Who's going to come back after that? Who knows? Why would
there's no path to redemption for Disney here?
I don't think so. I mean, for me personally, it would take Disney completely retconning everything they've done.
So basically getting rid of the sequel trilogy and starting completely over?
Getting rid of the sequel trilogy, using the Lucas treatments, restoring the expanded universe, and just getting rid of everything they've produced up to this point under Disney, because it's all garbage anyway. So short of that happening, I don't see any kind of redemption. And it's a tall order for sure, but it's not too tall, because they do it with franchises like the Terminator all the time. I think the last 3 sequels treated the previous sequels like they didn't exist. So they've done it multiple times.
Yeah, but with the state that franchise is in, I'm not sure that's a good model to follow. So obviously, because you're such an outspoken critic, you do get a lot of attention from some of the people on the opposite side of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So what I want to ask you is, how do you handle attacks and responses from people within the Lucasfilm orbit, people like Pablo Hidalgo and Brian Young and those of that nature, who see you in your blog as just conspiracy theory or just an example of fan hate as opposed to legitimate criticism?
Yeah. Well, when you want to discredit someone, you cite the word conspiracy, because right away just citing that word puts you in the realm of Loch Ness Monster and Yeti and stuff. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to evoke this image. But the fact of the matter is, people get together to do bad things. People conspire, particularly SJWs. They don't call it conspiring anymore. Now they call it organizing. But it's the same damn thing. So, again, I just have no respect whatsoever for their opinions or them. It's just all garbage. So
you just ignore their criticisms?
Well, I respond to it. And I try to respond to it in an amusing way through a blog post. I comment, I reply, to what they're saying or what they're asserting, if I feel it warrants a response. But outside of that, it's just a shoulder shrug.
So you've kind of written off, Star Wars in terms of the movies, but let me ask you, what is your take on Disney Plus and the plans that they have for Star Wars content on television on that platform? Because we are getting shows like The Mandalorian, we're getting the Cassian Andor show, we're getting an Obi-Wan TV show, and it seems like a large chunk of Star Wars' future is going to be on TV. So do you think that there's a way for Disney to kind of redeem itself in the TV format as opposed to the movie format? What are your thoughts?
Well, first and foremost, I couldn't care less. I won't be watching any of it. I just don't care about any of it. Secondly, I don't think it'll do much of anything anyways, because again, they're being made by the same people that they're hiring, that don't have the talent to really pull this off.
Like you've got Jon Favreau and Jon Filoni, or Dave Filoni, working on The Mandalorian.
Yeah, but those are 2 people.
But it's not the same people working on the movies, right?
Well, it's the same special effects house, right?
Yeah, but they're not the ones making the final calls. Like the writers, the filmmakers, stuff like that. Jon Favreau is the one who's kind of shepherding the Mandalorian, and he's got a pretty good track record. Would you say that it's that his involvement doesn't bode well?
Jon Favreau's involvement?
Yeah,
and
Dave Filoni's.
I like Iron Man 1, but I was not impressed with Iron Man 2 or Aliens and Cowboys. So I think his track record is a little more hit and miss than folks maybe want to admit. He seems like a nice guy on the surface, but I haven't looked too deeply into his Twitter feed either. At the end of the day, I did look into the Twitter feed of Pedro Pascal, who is essentially another Chuck Wendig.
He's the lead actor in The Mandalorian.
In Mandalorian. So it's really just going to be the same shit all over again. You want people like Filoni and Favreau to be in charge, but a production of that size is a collaborative effort. There are multiple people working on there, and as much as Favreau might be in charge, he can't be watching over the shoulders of every single person, every single moment.
But he can't have the final say in what goes into the show's story.
I look at something like the sequel trilogy, for instance. J.J. Abrams is in charge, but there was a particular effects artist whose name escapes me at this point, and his work looks like something out of a Halloween house. They look like props from a Halloween house. It's just the way it is. Just the way it is. I don't have high hopes, and I know you probably feel that Filoni's in charge, so he'll make things right. I'm just not confident.
Well, I wouldn't say Filoni's in charge, but he seems to be. He seems to have a hand in.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean Filoni. I meant Favreau. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I misspoke.
All right. So, we kind of talked about Disney Plus. What do you think is the future? What do you think the future of Star Wars is going to be? How is it going to evolve? And do you think it will ever get to the point where the current divide in the fandom is somehow healed?
Say that one more time.
So I just want to get your thoughts on how you see the future of Star Wars shaping up, how it's going to evolve, and do you think that it could ever get to the point where the current divide in the fandom is healed?
Well, to see what the future is for the Star Wars fandom, you look at the original Battlestar Galactica fandom, because I went through all of this exact same stuff right around 2000 to 2005 when they were doing the remake. Exactly all the same things happened. The Battlestar fandom criticized the production. The production called the fandom racist, misogynist, sexist. It's all exactly the same. And what ended up happening was towards the end of the run of the show, there was so much infighting within fandom that people ended up not talking to each other anymore. People who had been friends for years online left forums. People were selling their collection on eBay because they just had enough. They didn't even want to look at it anymore. So that's essentially the future Star Wars now has. Once this sequel trilogy is done, all these Johnny-come-latelys are going to move to something else. And they're not going to stick with it for 40 years like we did.
So you think rather than the fandom healing, the part that feels alienated is going to move to something else to become fans of?
Well, I think the new fans are going to move on to something. I think they're going to move on to something else. The new Harry Potter, the new Twilight, whatever it is, the Raylos, the Johnny-come-latelys, the people who have been hardcore fans since 2017. They'll move on to the next big fad. Within the core fan base, the people who have been with it for decades, I think they're just going to band it all together. I don't know that they're going to replace it with anything. They're just going to say the hell with it. And you'll still have a few diehards around, I'm sure. But like for me, I've already abandoned it. I won't purchase anything with a Star Wars or Disney logo on it anymore. I have no interest in it at all.
And that is an interesting point, because the fandom, it's not just about, the celebration of the IP. The fandom is the economic engine that drives these things. They're the ones who buy the toys. They're the ones who buy the merchandise and stuff like that. And if you alienate those people, they stop buying those things.
Yeah. And, telling, when you had Wendig and Geek Girl Diva telling, long time, decades old fans that they weren't customers, what do you say to that? How do you respond to that? I mean, if you walked into a shop and you said, gee, there's an issue with this shoe here, and they said, you're not a customer, you'd walk out and never come back again.
So for the people out there who haven't had a chance to check out your blog yet, which I highly recommend they do, you came out a little while back, and for some reason you got it in your head that you were going to make a book. And what I want to know is, and maybe you could tell everyone watching, what is this book that you're working on, and why are you working on it, and what inspired you to create a book?
Well, I've had a number of people over the months ask me to put it in book form. I think a number of people are kind of wanting some kind of souvenir to remember this time, remember the Fandom menace. So I decided to put up an Indiegogo and put one together. And, it's not going to be a straight reprinting of the blog. It's essentially going to use the blog as the foundation of research for the book. But the book is going to be organized according to the Geekergate, and it's going to focus more on the strategies and tactics that have been used in this process by SJWs and how to combat them. So I'm also going to be offering suggestions for countermeasures. So hopefully when the next Geekergate happens, which it will, there will be something out there that people can look to kind of see what's coming around the corner and how to combat it more effectively.
So it says here that due to popular demand, you've opened a campaign to transform your blog into a book. And it sounds like you're going to be kind of like an editor. You're going to be taking stuff that you've researched in the past and compiling it into a novel form. Mm-hmm. And basically, the narrative is going to be organized according to the phases of the Geekergate. What is Geekergate?
Yeah, so the Geekergate is essentially what people have referred to as Gamergate, Comicsgate. It's the exact same thing that happens in every IP. It happened in Doctor Who just recently. It happened in Battlestar, almost 20 years ago now. It happened in Ghostbusters, when they criticized the movie with the all-female cast. Feig came out and called everybody misogynists. This thing, it happens over and over and over again. So the Geekergate was based on my observation this time around, having gone through it before with the Battlestar fandom. I was kind of able to look for things. I kind of knew what to look for this time around. Whereas with the Battlestar fandom, we were just blindsided by it. Nothing. We had never heard of anything like that happening before.
So it says the completion of this book will put into record a fan's perspective of the events surrounding Disney's takeover of the Star Wars franchise. So it's basically going to chronicle Disney's acquisition and mismanagement of Star Wars in your view,
right?
But from a fan's perspective,
right? So the blog will be the foundation of the research. I'll be organizing it in more of a according to the Geekergate, and because I'll be rereading all of these posts, I'll be connecting more dots that I probably have missed because this blog has been going on for so long now. And there will be additional research because anytime you put together a nonfiction book, inevitably there are holes that have to be filled. You have to go back and fill those holes with additional research. So there will be things that don't appear in the blog as well. And I'm going to be recreating Star Wars imagery with Star Wars knockoff action figures from the set.
So you don't get sued.
Right.
Yeah, you don't want an Axanar situation going on there.
No. So that'll be kind of funny because Disney era is essentially knockoff Star Wars. So it's kind of a commentary too.
So how much? What's your goal here? Like, how much are you trying to raise to do this book?
So I'm looking to raise $30,000, and I came up with that figure based on the cost of the book and the percentages coming out of Indiegogo and Stripe, and a number of other things. I actually have a blog post entitled "What is the 30K for?" Where I lay it out for people so they can see why I came up with that figure. When you self-publish, the cost per unit goes down the more you buy.
Yeah, in bulk.
Right. So if I had only made my goal 5,000, then the cost per book could have been up to $50 maybe. I'm not sure. I didn't run the numbers on that, but I wanted to make sure it was close to 25. So that's what I came up with.
All right. And is this the official cover for your book? Who is this on the cover, and what's going on there?
So that's Pablo Hidalgo. That was an internet meme I made one day because he kept talking about me one day. So I put,
is that you living rent free in his brain?
Right. That's exactly what it is. It's exactly what it is. So, and then I created this mock cover because I needed something. And it really was intended to be, a temporary mock cover because it's not a very good design. But everybody keeps asking me to keep it. But, Pablo is not really the main cog in Star Wars. He's just kind of a minor character.
Has Pablo sent you a cease and desist yet? I know you have a tweet here where he kind of tacitly endorses this thing.
Yeah.
It says, just found out that Chewbacca is trying to crowdfund a book with me on the cover. I kind of want it.
Yeah.
How could you not? And then he got a picture of the cover on there.
Yeah. Sure. I think it was a few days after that he had locked up his account. I'm not quite sure of the timeline of that, but there was one post where he was remarking on my Indiegogo. Oh, I had just extended it another 30 days. And it must have been hours after I extended it, just hours. And he posted about that saying, he extended it for 30 days. So he's obviously been watching this thing regularly. I imagine he might be refreshing the screen every few hours. But yeah, so that was that.
So looks like you've got almost $5,000 raised so far. You've got 126 backers. What do people get for backing the book?
So for the $25 tier, you get the book. For $35, excuse me. For $35, you get the book, and then I'll sign it. Either on the cover with a silver pen or on the front page with a black Sharpie. It's your choice. And then after that, I essentially have options for ordering 2 or 3, and you get a discount depending on how many you order.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a discount up for Lucasfilm employees. Anyone who emails me from a lucasfilm.com email address and requests a discount will get a secret link that they can order the book at a 10% discount.
So Lucasfilm has their employee discount, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you had anyone take you up on that?
Not yet.
Not yet.
No.
Are you going to give Pablo a free copy?
Oh, I would love to. I'll even sign it.
All right. So when does the Indiegogo complete? When like at what? What's the date that it ends?
Currently, right now, it has 23 days left.
23 days left. So it looks like it's going to go right to the start of November, basically.
Yeah.
All right. And how can people help support your Indiegogo?
Well, they can either back it or, just go ahead and put out the Indiegogo out on social media, email it to a friend, post it in a comments section of a YouTube video, pass the trailers around. That last trailer I produced is actually pretty good. It should grab people, but that's about what you can do.
All right, cool. So to all the people in the comments section on YouTube and Facebook, if you have any questions for Itchy, now's the time to submit them. I can see you guys in my control panel here. But before we get to any of those, Itchy, where can people find out more about you? Where can they follow you on Twitter, and are you on Facebook? Why don't you let people know where you're at?
Sure. So I am on my blog, DisneyStarWarsIsDumb.wordpress.com. You can find me there. You can email me at itchybacca@protonmail.com. And I am also on Twitter at twitter.com/itchybacca.
Itchybacca@protonmail?
Yeah.
.com.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is that correct up there? ITCHYBACCA.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So if you want to email him any tips or inside info.
And my email address is listed on my blog on the About page as well.
And then on Twitter, you can find him at Itchy Bacca,
yep.
BACCA. And then we have your Indiegogo, where if you go to Indiegogo.com, and I'm certain if you just search for Disney Star Wars is Dumb, it'll pop up. But here's the link for anyone who wants to go directly there. And of course, the WordPress blog, DisneyStarWarsIsDumb.wordpress.com. And that's pretty much all I got for you. Itchy, thank you so much for coming on the Legion of Doom live stream tonight. It was a real pleasure finally getting to talk to you in person. I know we talk almost daily on Twitter. So this was a real treat to get to hear your voice.
Yeah.
Maybe someday you'll reveal your secret identity.
Perhaps.
But to all the people out there, this should be proof that me and Itchy are not the same person. There have been people who have accused me of secretly being many different accounts online. I'm not smart enough to keep all that stuff, straight. So I'm just like, for me, it's the only account I have.
Seems to be a number of people that are getting accused of that.
Anyway, Itchy, thank you so much for being online. Everyone, thank you all for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed this live stream. And go please support Itchy over on Indiegogo and check out his blog. He does great work. And thank you all so much for coming by, and I will catch you in the next live stream. Until
thank you
next
much.
time, this is Matt and Itchy. We'll see you later.